Alright, another DraftScience video presentation. Alright, so we're still on the subject of 1/2 mv squared, the kinetic energy formula, versus the rational description in mathematical form of what energy constitutes. Alright, so this is Jerry Hall again, who really should just out himself. I mean, who are you? What kind of imbecile are you? I mean, to start with such a stupid statement, he says, friction doesn't take away momentum. I mean, it's the dumbest, stupidest. You can't know anything about physics if you don't know that rule, that there's no possible way you can have any kind of friction without either, well, really, you can only do one thing. You can only take away its velocity. That's what friction does. It never does something else. It always degrades your velocity. You never have the same velocity and create friction. You can't do that. It's impossible. There's no experiment in the history of mankind. There's no common experience that anybody ever had. I put my brakes on and I kept going the same exact speed, even though my wheels were losing rubber and the even though friction was well happening. I wasn't skidding on ice. I mean, everybody knows you can't just keep going the same speed and have friction. You can't create heat, or you can't create noise, or you can't create anything superfluous to your motion and say, no problem. You can't even hit atoms in space, okay? I mean, if I'm flying through space, I mean, it's not a perfectly free ride. I mean, even the wrench getting thrown to Mars is probably going to slow down a little bit because it's going to hit stuff. And every single thing it hits is going to steal a little bit of its energy. I mean, this is just the dumbest statement ever made, I think, by any of you trolley pieces of crap. And I'm just wondering, why do you do this? I mean, you obviously don't know anything about physics, and here you are pretending you're making some defense of physics, and it's so pathetic. I mean, you're not like a Trump lawyer. You're not getting paid to be a moron. I mean, what exactly is your motivation? You're so, I mean, I can't even, I'm saying, why am I even talking to somebody this dumb? I mean, little kids can know this truth. You know, they can at least know it intuitively, you know. You could probably ask them the question in the right way and they'll get the right, oh man, if I push against you, do you get to go just as fast? I mean, they can figure it out that you're going to slow down, that you're going to lose energy. You know, that if I have a pendulum swinging back and forth and I put a building next to it and force it to crash into the building, it's not going to swing back and forth anymore. You know, it's fun. It's not going to have as much energy anymore, is it? I mean, the dumbest of statements. All right, so that's how he starts, with something so frickin' stupid. I couldn't even read the rest. I said, there's nothing to read here. What is this person doing? And why are these pathetic arguments the only ones generated? Oh, it's because I'm right. That's why. If somebody rational and sensible could make an argument, then they would. But nobody can, and all there are these despicable trolley asswipes who sit there and just keep defending their religion. It's pathetic. All right, anyway. It becomes a part of the total momentum in the system. So what the hell does that mean? That's not this conversation. We're not talking about the entire universe's system and that it's closed and that, yes, it's always conserved in the total system. That's not the subject. The subject is if I put a generator on a on a 2-ton train going 10 miles an hour and a 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour, did I say 2? Well, anyway, twice as fast, that somehow I'll generate more energy if I put it on the lighter train. That if I want to smash a door, right, and I want to break into a castle, I should get myself I should get smaller and smaller trees and move them faster and faster into the door, because that works so much better than taking a big heavy object and moving it slowly into the door. Yeah, they've been doing it the wrong way. All those people of old, they did everything the wrong way. Little tiny catapults shooting little tiny objects. Oh, that's so much better at knocking the walls of the castle down. I mean, you're an imbecile. All right, anyway. It's possible to make things how complicated you want. So again, I'm making it simpler, right? He's in defense of this 1/2 mv squared, which I've already pointed out historically its history. Its history was it was just mv squared, okay? That's how it started. And, 60, 70 years later, they decided, well, we better fix this because it's outrageously inaccurate. So let's put a half in front of it, to at least knock it down a little bit so it isn't outrageously, imbecilically silly. I mean, you're oh. So anyway, so this is just some kind of bizarre slander to imply that somehow I'm arguing in defense of some complicated solution when I'm saying mv squared is energy. Momentum is energy. There's no other way to accurately assess something's capacity to change the universe or move molecules or change atoms or do any of this thing called action. Your action ability in the universe is defined by your mass and motion. And obviously the other thing you're interacting with. I mean, there is some relativity involved in the sense that you could be standing still and the bullet hits you, or you could run really fast into the bullet. But we're just going by the common notion that obviously there is momentum, total momentum between the two objects. All right, anyway. You want, but not necessary. So, again, this has nothing to do with that moronic statement. You're defending the silly, contrived, mushy bullshit equation. I'm defending Newton's equation. A closed system can involve two pieces of millions. A closed system can involve two pieces of millions. Wow, you're less coherent. I mean, I never realized you were this stupid. I mean, this isn't even written well. So a closed system can involve two pieces or millions. Yeah, so what? Again, the argument is simple. You're saying that momentum doesn't define energy. I'm asking you to provide me one link where momentum failed to get the correct answer, or show me one link of one experiment where you actually extracted the extra energy from the lighter thing going faster, whether you actually proved that the heavier bullet going half the speed does less damage or heats up things or moves less atoms than the lighter bullet going twice the speed. Where did you ever demonstrate that the light object has twice as much energy, that it causes twice as many molecular movements? You never did that. That's the definition of energy. You're an imbecile and you're a preposterous asshole to keep doing this crap after I've made these arguments over and over again. You have zero evidence defending your theory. Zero. There is none. The only thing you can show me is clay experiments. Look, it goes twice as far in clay. Yeah, but it doesn't compress a spring twice as much. It doesn't all the other ways of assessing. Why don't we all step on clay to see how heavy we are? Right? Do we step on clay, or like silly putty, some sort of mushy thing that's going to get wrong answers? No, we don't do that. For a reason, because we don't want the wrong answer. Anyway, it doesn't change the basic principle, so you don't even understand the basic principle. You have no understanding. Friction doesn't take away momentum. The dumbest thing ever I've read about physics. No physics statement has ever been dumber than that statement I just read. It's so dumb as a principle. All right, anyway, energy can be added to a system or completely lost. Again, we're following the energy. That's the whole point. No one's arguing the energy is truly lost, except I will argue in gravity it is. But regardless, in most cases of interactions, there is no lost energy. We're just saying, where does the energy go? And clearly in the examples provided, if you 100% transfer the momentum, it is impossible that you heated something, or that you made sounds, or that you did any of this stuff. So you're just so full of shit. All right, momentum can't. So who's arguing that, right? Oh, that's right, nobody. So no such thing as energy being completely lost. That's just absolute nonsense. That's not conventional physics, so I don't even know who you're defending with that nonsense, because nobody believes that. Like I said, there's a subtle argument to be made about whether the energy is even lost with gravity. It's kind of complicated. you move something, the mass actually moves in space, and in a sense is conserving the energy by moving. But the fact is, if it doesn't interact with anything, you can't say the energy was conserved because the time was still lost. But anyway, I've already made those arguments, and you're clearly not capable of understanding them. So it's not very far we can go with that. It's not the same thing. Energy is momentum. Again, you can't show me a single experiment on Earth where you ever collected something called kinetic energy that was more than momentum. So you'll never show me that experiment because it doesn't exist. All right. That was my point. Well, your point is you have zero evidence. Zero. Zero, zero, zero. Again, the history is clear. The whole invention of this stupid kinetic energy formula, it was called the living force by Leibniz. Silly, rich people who like to play with toys contrived an experiment, a gravitational experiment that gave them the illusion that, oh, it's 4 times the energy, but it really isn't, because it's only twice the velocity when it hits the ground. So because you don't understand force at all and how it's collected by objects, how it's transferred, and you're an imbecile and an idiot, and you don't know that it's very different. 2 kinetic balls, 2 steel balls hitting each other is really different than gravity. Not the same thing at all. Not the same. You can't use the same equation and say, oh, there, I figured it out. It's not the same. Nothing like it. Okay? So if I have to, I'll illustrate that again. An example is if you connect 2 toys. So again, you're going to make up a new thought experiment. We already had the thought experiment. Physics girl already provided us the ludicrous and idiotic notion that momentum is 100% transferred, and yet half the energy was lost. Okay, we already have a silly statement. I mean, previous to your idiotic statement, she had the winning stupid statement. Okay, but I don't know what to say. You're just so stupid. And so now you're going to sit there and just make up some fake thing you didn't do. It's not a real experiment. And again, you're just talking about a principle of, well, if I apply the force with a rubber band now, so let's not use gravity. Let's use some other force, some other way to transfer the energy. Well, of course it's going to work different. Of course the same rules don't apply, you idiot. Okay. I mean, you're just so dumb. Anyway, an example is if you connect 2 toys to a rubber band. One is a truck and the other is a car smaller than the truck. Why don't you just say one weighs half as much as the other? Oh, instead of being an asshole. Anyway, when you pull them and let the small car will move faster and travel a longer distance than the truck. Yeah, because now you're applying one force between the 2 objects. You're not blowing wind on both of them. So their sails aren't collecting it, right? Their mass is no longer doing the collecting of the energy. Can you understand? Now it's a different force applied in a completely different way. So before, where gravity pushes more on a steel ball than it pushes on a feather, because gravity collects force based on your mass. The more your mass, the more force you collect. That's why when the heavy thing hits, it hits harder and makes big holes and blows things up and stuff, is because it actually collected more energy, because it had more matter bits to collect it. I mean, I gave you rain examples, all kinds of examples of how gravity works. You collect it based on your mass. Feathers have very little mass. They collect very little energy from gravity. So in the same amount of time, they fall at exactly the same speed because the feather collects less energy than the heavy steel ball. I mean, how dumb can you be? Now, if I put a rubber band between the 2 objects, I have one force, okay? The stretching of the rubber band, the pulling of the rubber band. Now, the light thing is going to collect the energy much easier because it's going to be able to move and relax the rubber band, where the heavy thing is going to take much more energy to move because of its inertia, because of the fact that you have to pull more weight. So the contest is exactly the opposite, in the sense that the mechanism you're using to apply the energy isn't the same at all. All right. Since they are connected to the same rubber band, it's the same force acting on both objects. Exactly, the same amount of force is being applied to both objects. And obviously the heavy one takes longer to accelerate than the lighter one to overcome the friction. Duh. Yeah. I guess we're going to apply a duh there. Let's pretend it's 7NWFD. Well, that's just fun. I can't tell you how. Oh, yeah, let's pretend. I don't want to do that. All right, anyway, if F is an angle, you put cosine in there as well. Why would I do any of this angle crap or any of... Why do I need any of this? Oh, yeah, that's right. You're the one complicating it unnecessarily. So what a joke. He's talking about unnecessary complications, and here he is complicating something unnecessarily. Okay, if F is the same for both objects and D is bigger for the light object, yeah, and it's bigger because of the fact is it acquires the same amount. They have different masses. You still can't quite figure out this whole mass thing. The mass is just as important as the velocity. So obviously if you're moving more mass, you can't push it as fast. I mean, everybody understands that. If there's a heavy thing and a light thing and I got to push them somewhere, I'm going to be able to push the light thing faster, quicker than I can push the heavy thing. It's going to take more energy to push the heavy thing the same speed as I'm pushing the light thing. Duh. Oh, fuck. Alright, if F is the same for both objects and D is bigger, so he's using words that are just so useless. There's only two components here, mass and velocity, even in your silly formula. I mean, can't you use the proper terms? Bigger for the lighter object than the work done, also the larger for that one. Okay. D is bigger for the light object than the work done. So he's comparing distance to work done. So obviously you did the same amount of work. Moving the heavy thing 1 inch or moving the light thing 2 inches, same work, idiot. Much done much also. Let's see. The light object, then the work done much also be larger for that one. So again, he thinks moving light things this distance, it's the same amount of energy to move a heavy thing the same distance. Same energy. I mean, that's how stupid and ignorant and dumb and uselessly tripey this whole fucking bullshit is. It's pathetic that this is, it's pathetic that I'm even reading this nonsense. In other words, the small car does more work than the truck. So here we go again. Just absolute nonsense. No evidence of that. Just zero. And he just says it as if it's a fact, as if he did the experiment and proved that now the small item going faster actually has more energy, and that if we put a generator on its wheel and we lit an LED, we would light the LED longer on the little thing than on the big thing. We could charge a battery better with little things going fast than big things going slow. Complete nonsense. Why don't we have small generators then? They have massive generators inside of, Hoover Dam, just gigantic. I mean, 100 meters across kind of thing, gigantic. Why? Why are they using big ones when they can get so much more energy if they lose little generators? Shit. Anyway, in other words, the small car does more work than the truck. So again, just too stupid. You quoted me that I said physics is intuitive. I never said any such thing. I've said right from the beginning I couldn't give a fuck about this stupid word intuition. It's of no value in a conversation. You either make an argument or you don't make an argument. Okay, the fact that you think something seems like, that's not my problem. I have no use for intuition as a source of knowledge. But clearly, through experience, you derive knowledge. So if I see the same thing happen 1 million times, I mean, I put the same ingredients in, I get the same outcome 1 million times in a row, I'm not going to call it intuition that I know. I'm going to call it experience. I'm going to call it evidence. I'm going to call it proof. Okay, I don't need this word intuition. All right, But if I see ocean waves and I start saying, well, everything is like an ocean, everything that goes lumpy is an ocean wave, yeah, then I'm being a retard. Okay, no, I said it's counterintuitive, or at least that what I meant. Oh, so now you're saying, well, yes, that's what I meant, but yes, reasonable people could misinterpret me. You're a jerk. You skipped the not. Who cares? Not important. All right, well, his email is here. We'll take that out of politeness. Yeah. Fuck you. Anyway, hi. Kinetic energy is basically describing how long distance an object will travel. So what is this? This is like before it stops. You can use the formula. Okay, so I guess this is his previous moron comment. Okay. So I guess he included that for no good reason. This is also the area of the rectangle. Since it's divided in half, you get D equals VT divided by 2. So I've already explained where this formula comes from, and it's just crap. And again, you can't defend it with a single piece of evidence. So until, what's the point of any of this tripe until you actually provide a piece of evidence? Show me the experiment where they derive twice the energy from the lighter thing. Why is that difficult for you to do? Show an experiment where the heavy thing moving half the speed has half the energy of the light thing moving twice the speed. Just show me one experiment where you demonstrate this is a physical reality. And all you're going to be able to do is go back to 1710 or something and start dropping balls into clay and saying clay is the only way to tell the real energy of something, when clearly it's obvious that clay displaces, and it makes it creates so much deformation that all the energy is absorbed. The slower the object goes, the more energy it absorbs, and the faster it goes, the further it'll go through the clay. So it's clearly not going to tell you the truth. So go ahead and keep living in your little lies, you fucking moron. Yes. God. The level of this bullshit is just, they're not even coming close to making a counter argument that's coherent. Not even close. Not even something that, is at least the tiniest bit challenging. I mean, they're not challenging anything. So, maybe I'll do the quick, do it again. Just point out how you have to understand how the forces are different. So as I've pointed out, gravity, has sort of a, I mean, each force is different, but I mean, magnetism is doing something similar. But the idea is you have matter in you, atoms. You have atomic weight, and it's your atomic weight, that decides how much gravity affects you. So even though the rate of velocity is the same, and we say the force is 9.8 meters per second, squared, every second, that doesn't mean the force actually is collected by the objects at the same amount. This is just telling you this statement is just this statement. This statement is just telling you that everything will fall at the same rate. It's not telling you that everything's collecting the same amount of energy. So you do understand that this object has no energy if it's just sitting somewhere. Now, we say it has potential because of the fact that it's in a gravitational field, but I'm just saying outside the gravitational field, if it's not moving, if it doesn't have its own velocity, it's not a wrench flying through space, right? If it doesn't have its own velocity, it's just sitting. It doesn't have any energy. So if I now put it in a gravitational field, what's going to happen? Well, the gravity is going to hit it at a fixed rate. There's a certain amount of gravity coming down, a certain amount of force interacting. And the fact is you can just understand that the mass is essentially a sail. The mass is just telling you how many sails do you have on your boat? How much wind will you collect? And the more mass you have, the more wind you collect. And therefore you will, when you hit the ground, you will have more momentum. So you're collecting more momentum if you're a heavy object. And the lighter you are, the less momentum you're collecting. Even though you're falling at exactly the same rate, okay, and you'll hit the ground at the same time. In that traveling time, in the time you were exposed to the energy and the energy was allowed to affect your motion, this big object with lots of atoms in it, lots of elements, electrons and protons, it has much more sail. It's collected much more wind, and now when it hits the ground, that wind will be released. And that's what's really happening. You're collecting the wind, and then you release the wind. And the light object collected very little wind. It'll make very little dent. The heavy object with lots of sails collected lots of wind, and it will resolve it here. And it's all about just momentum. Your mass times your velocity. That's the only formula you need. And it's the only one that's going to tell you the truth. And then, like I said, in the other examples of kinetic energy, again, the classic kinetic energy experiment is you have, steel ball, and then you swing another steel ball into it. And what happens? Well, all the momentum, every bit of this velocity transfers to this object. It shoots up there, and this one gets stuck here. So there's a complete transfer, essentially. I mean, it does make a sound, it does get hot, but 99.9% of the energy is transferred, and it's all just in the form of mass and velocity. If I change the mass, then I won't be able to transfer as much of the energy, and this ball will end up keep moving a little. This ball will leave at the same velocity as this one, and then once it's done that, this one will have a little more energy and it'll keep moving. And if I make it a heavier ball, then it won't go as high. The other ball goes here, the heavier one will only go here. But it had collected just as much energy. It still has exactly the same amount of momentum. The MV is the same, MV is the same. Their theory is that this has more energy. This one, the lighter one, has more energy. It doesn't have more energy. Hasn't collected more gravitational force. It hasn't done any of that. So it's absolute nonsense. You people are just too stupid. No point in talking to human beings. Just morons. Alright, we'll get rid of that. So this is a Farley video, which is even, super troll. So he spends, the whole beginning here is just him talking over the video, what's the point, right? So I didn't bother. So here, it seems he has paused me to say something, so we'll see what happens.
Showing the different, so I guess we have to zoom in here, if you can see my mouse. This is the double, I don't know, I think this is supposed to be the single slit experiment, and this is
no, it's kind of obvious it's the double slit experiment. So the argument's going to be this trivial. He's just going to waste time. I drew a perfectly coherent description of the various experiments. I showed them, drew them. How could you say this is the single slit? How could he say that? And it's just so stupid. And clearly I just indicated that I'm not giving exact details, because what's the point, right? It's just to illustrate that the single slit and the double slit aren't the same pattern. That was the argument being made. Ken Wheeler thinks they're the same pattern. He doesn't understand that there's a pattern change when you have two slits. Oh, amazing.
Supposed to be the double slit experiment. Now, one of the things that Gary does very deceptively is he'll talk out of two sides of a snake oil salesman mouth. And on the one hand, he'll say that these dark bands in the double slit are never totally dark, and therefore the argument that open...
They aren't. So, okay, so let's just say, is that a fact or not a fact? Oh yeah, that's right, it's a fact. But anyway, let's continue.
A second slit causes less light to reach this point is invalid, because...
So a second slit, so he's going back to an experiment already debunked. So there's this theory in physics that's never been proven, never been demonstrated by anything called evidence. There is no evidence anywhere that this thing happens. He's claiming it does happen, and he has proof, but he has zero evidence. So it's been cited by lots of physicists, just like they cite photon detectors and all that stuff. No evidence anybody ever made a photon detector for a slit experiment. No evidence that ever happened in the history of physics. Because, frankly, no physicist would be stupid enough to think it's possible that you could watch a photon passing by. Okay, no physicist thinks that's possible. I mean, no one that went to school or got an education or a degree, no one believes that's possible. So, of course, they never did it. And yet, but they talk about it. It's one of their fables. It's one of their little stories in their religious thing, where they have those little stories about what David did or this guy did or that. These are little fairy stories they tell, okay, in their religion. And that's all it is. So, in the double slit experiment, there's this theory, okay, this contention, this whatever you want to call it, this bullshit that they made up. Okay, so this is there's distances between these. Well, I'll put them in as accurately as possible. Let's just do it the way it actually looks. All right, so let's just say we have 4 things in the middle, then we have the dead spot, and then we have 2 here, and we have 2 over here. Okay, and that's pretty much accurate enough. So they have this contention that, okay, so I have the slits here, 2 slits, okay, that's pretty obvious, right? Can't confuse it. And they have this argument that if I have them both displaying and they're both no, I just open one, so I close one of the slits. Their theory is, okay, that there'll still be some sort of pattern, I would argue there will too. It'll be something like this maybe, okay. And what they're arguing is that when I open this other slit, right, so this spot, when one slit is covered, they say this location is light, and this location is light, and this location is light. So unlike the double slit where it's a dark, they say it's a light. All right, because when I close, so when I close one slit, this is the pattern. If I close this slit and open this slit, the fact is I'll get the pattern's going to be in almost exactly the same place, right? Because this distance isn't enough to change it, so it'll look like this. Okay, that's how they're going to look like if I open them as single slits. Okay, but when I open them as a double slit, I'm invoking this longer distance. See, and that's the key distance to making the little bars. So anyway, so it really doesn't matter which slit I open or which slit I close. This is what the pattern is going to look like. Now they think, Feynman will draw it. Feynman will draw this like that. He'll draw, well, this one will make a hump over here, and then this one will make a hump over here. That's how they'll draw it. So even though it's only a millimeter of distance, this entire experiment, they think that these 2 patterns happen way over here from each other, like they're way off center. But anyway, that part doesn't matter. So back to the point. So obviously this is a continuous pile of light. So there's actually, so when one slit is open, their argument is that there's light going to these locations. And then when they open this, that light disappears. All right. So there's 0 evidence that's the truth. No credible experiment. Now the only one he linked me to was a Christian scientist, a physicist who's a Christian. And the experiment he did sucked. Okay, we got no details, saw nothing, and he was using an electronic filter. That is something that only accepted photons that came at a certain speed. So if I actually made more photons, it would register fewer photons, because the more photons I make, the more it cancels them out because they're too close together, if you get me. So he had a filter imposed that actually canceled. When I open the second slit, it's actually canceling the light. So of course that's how it looked. But anyway, so completely fraudulent. I mean, you can't trust Christian physicists. Get real. But anyway, complete fraudulent experiment. So I already have the video up. I've already done this debunk. And here he is raising the same argument as if he has one shred of evidence anywhere in the annals of physics demonstrating that this actually gets darker. The truth is when you have one slit open, you're only getting light from one source. So if they were heads and tails you were throwing at the wall, well, you have 2 sources, obviously, I'm arguing. And so you're throwing heads and tails from just 2 sources. When you double the sources, you quadruple the capacity to make matches. And so it's just completely untrue that if I close one of the slits, a spot that was light gets dark. it never happens. It's just that with the single slits open, these two patterns are so faded, okay, that you really don't see what's happening. And when you do combine them, when you open both slits, it's like you added 4 of these. All right, now you have 4 times the potential to make a matches. All right, and so now the spots that do match get much brighter because there's 4 times the number of capacity to make matches. So these spots get much brighter. They get 4 times brighter when you open the second slit. The light spots get 4 times brighter. That makes this look darker, but it didn't actually get darker. So again, it's just another one of their complete frauds. Okay, they just keep claiming they've demonstrated something, or the evidence, or there's no good reason not to believe, kind of thing. Like you should have to believe, even though they have no corroborating evidence. Never repeated the Eddington experiment. 400 times better resolution from space, never done, as far as we know. They say nobody claims they did it. 400 times better resolution, and we've been in space for 50 years, and we're supposed to believe they've never done the experiment, never even tried it. Right? An experiment that's critical to physics and the theory of relativity, and yet they never repeated it with 400 times better resolution. Yeah, I'm supposed to believe that's true. And again, this fundamental experiment where you're shining light from one source, and it makes light at a location, and then you open and you shine another flashlight, and you make the spot that was light dark. So an insanely phenomenal, holy shit kind of phenomenon. I made light disappear. I killed the light. I destroyed it, the photons. They didn't get there anymore. I mean, kind of an amazing experiment, and we don't have one single video of it. Not one single experimentalist has ever been able to successfully accomplish the task. So I'm an irrational asshole because I say, that's not a very well proven theory. That sounds like just a story. I mean, why don't you talk about, whales eating people and stuff? I mean, if you're going to go that far and tell me that big preposterous pile of crap and say it actually happens when you have zero evidence that it actually happens. Zero evidence that it actually happens. Credible evidence. I mean, what a lying sack of shit. I mean, to bring up the same subject again. I mean, shall I go back to the Christian Scientist bullshit experiment? Shall I read right in the paper where they talk about having a filter, that stops photon, that doesn't record photons that are too close to each other? Exactly the mechanism you need to create the result. The fake physics. So he's just defending fake physics. Lies, deception, chicanery, and he calls me a used car salesman. Amazing bullshit.
Because it's not like no light reaches that point. So it's sort of like people who say that mask wearing can't be effective because it doesn't catch 100% of the germs or the viruses. So therefore you don't need to wear a mask. It's a stupid argument.
Just absolute nonsense. So whatever. I didn't make any such argument, and I clearly in this drawing this wasn't the subject. But frankly, the subject was that the pattern created by the double slit is distinctively different than the pattern created by the single slit. Distinctively. Overtly, obviously different, substantially different, really different.
But more than that, it's like, but then he'll go on and say that the double slit and the single slit pattern is an on-off pattern where you have big.
Yeah. Basically, that's what it is, and all you're missing is an off. You're missing an on here. An on is missing, and another on is missing over here. And essentially, that's all the difference. There isn't a real substantial difference, but the small difference is a big difference. But there's only a small difference. It's just one missing node, on either side. And then another missing node at another location. And those locations are completely predictable by the force source math. We'll tell you exactly where those locations are.
Patches of nothing. So which is it? Is it that some light reaches here, or is it that no light reaches here? Because when you open a second slit in the two slit experiment, that you have points here where no light reaches where light previously reached.
Okay, so that's a big lie. So they just say it never happened. Just like a detector experiment, never happened, never been done, never been proven, never been demonstrated. So again, he can't produce a single piece of evidence that anyone ever did this experiment clinically, proved it, nice graphics, nice everything, showed where there it's light and bright, and then he opens the other slit and it gets dark. Never happened, not evidenced. It's just part of their lying storytelling. We're just going to tell stories about what we think we did or what we wish we did, the evidence we wish we had. You don't have the evidence. Yeah, and here you are insulting people who say, well, gee, if you don't have evidence, I shouldn't believe it.
And if you measure this with a fucking photodiode, you can actually prove that and see it.
Okay, so it's never been proven, never can see it, none of that happened, didn't happen, didn't happen, didn't happen. He has no evidence for this claim. Zero evidence for the claim.
With a scatter plot. And then he later, well, we'll just keep watching.
Thomas Young didn't realize there was these multiple patterns.
So I thumbed this down. I watched part. I kind of jumped ahead
Yeah, and you just talk over it anyway.
to the video, but I watched some of it
Double slit experiment. That's not really the reality. All right, then you have the single slit.
at double speed.
All right,
And I'm still at
and it
double
doesn't have
speed.
complexity, so it just has very bright, so essentially very bright, and then you get less bright.
So this is the part of the video there can't really be an argument. I mean, this is the facts. These are what's different about the pattern. So, you know, he doesn't even watch the video, does a cold watch like he's going to debunk something on the fly when he's an idiot, and of course he's not.
But there's sphere, plastic pattern could be under these little bars, and these look like bars. Point that out too. They look like what they're supposed to look like, which is rack.
Or whatever. He says, so without actually watching this shit, he says that the double slit math does not match this on-off pattern that you see, but when you actually plot it with a photo multiplier and you plot the data on a scatter plot, it actually does fit perfectly.
No, it doesn't. So that's another lie. So he won't provide a link where they actually do the measurements and use the simplistic, you know, their math, where the waves are breaking in the middle of this by Huygens. The only math that works considers the distance between the two surfaces. That's the math that works, all right? And so you have to explain how Huygens creates two waves that are centered on the surfaces. The wave center, the center of your little arced wave, has to be the surface. That math works. Okay, so let's just understand. They're claiming that two waves go through, somehow the single slit is converted into two waves. All right, so as these nice flat waves go in, and somehow two waves come out that interfere with each other. Well, if they split here in the middle, the wave center has to be here, and the wave center has to be here. That's the math that works. That says the surfaces are the sources. All right, so just understand how unintuitive or nonsensical that seems. Why would the wave split here in the very middle? It doesn't make any sense. There's nothing in here there in the middle to cause it to split in two. So that doesn't make any sense. All right, so the whole pattern is just created by this distance, and that's the argument. Okay, so I've said that their single slit math works. When they apply it to the double slit, no chance. So when they look at a double slit and they do this crap, well, let's just use this distance. Okay, there, that's the D. That will never get the right answer for the double slit, unless that D is less than a wavelength of the light. Anything above a wavelength of the light, it gets the wrong answer every time.
And it fits better and better the more data points you collect. So that's a lie.
Now, you're the liar. It's been proven so many times. Liar, liar, liar. Horrible liar. Again, you have no explanation for why the center is twice as big. So in the single slit, the center maxima is twice as large. They don't have any, their math doesn't say that. Their math doesn't predict that. They have to contrive that. Okay? So they have no explanation for it. Where obviously my explanation that the whole thing is just scatter, it's on an arc, and the real pattern is that it starts here and it starts here. Because everything that happens here, okay, especially if they make this distance really small. Let's say if they make the distance of the impediment, the size of it, let's say they make it 5 wavelengths, you know, really small. Really, really tiny. The distance that this thing is inside of is still 5 inside of the thickness of a human hair. That's where these two are the same length. Is less than a human hair worth of the whole pattern. The pattern's an inch across, and less than a human hair's worth is this contribution. So obviously this contribution can't be creating this whole big giant thing here. And yes, the big giant thing is actually being created by 2 nodes, and the laser beam's diffracted light is filling in the middle. They can't explain it. I just did. Fact.
One of the things that you'll notice is that if somebody's making 2 different arguments and they're both mutually contradictory, they're lying. Now, when I say lying, I mean
So there's no contradiction. So that's just a word. He just threw it out there like child molester or something. So we know he's a child molester, right? He has every kind. He sounds like one, looks like one, behaves like one. Yeah, it's got to be one. So we'll just say the words, blah 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 blah. I mean, it's just an accusation with absolutely no defense of it. He didn't explain any contradiction. He didn't show the contradiction. He's just playing word games.
Are they really lying, or are they confabulating in their mind, which is a form of lying to yourself? And
let's just reverse the question. Is he really lying? That I haven't countered all these arguments he's made already and completely debunked them. Who's being honest about the evidence? Does he really think they have photon detectors somewhere? That they actually did a detector experiment? They actually did this. Let's see if the spot gets brighter or darker. That they actually did the experiment. Did they do that with the radar experiment? Did they use, directional antennas to see if the signal's still getting to the surface, which completely blows up any theory of wave interference? No. He's the one lying.
Honestly, can't tell anymore. One thing I do know is that his rivalry with Ken Wheeler is definitely motivated by narcissism. So rather than watch this shit video...
Oh, whatever. So it's a shit video. It's motivated by narcissism. Anybody who has watched any of my videos for any period of time knows I find religious kooks quite irritating. And Ken Wheeler has clearly got a religious perspective about how physics works. And it's nonsense and idiotic, so of course I'm going to debunk him. He would be a logical target.
Because I've already done enough of these videos, and it's just...
You haven't done anything. You haven't made a sensible, reasonable, fair argument in your life. You're such a despicable shit of a human being.
Complete waste of time. I decided rather I'm going to take a test for Gary, the narcissistic personality inventory test.
All right, well, that we're not going to waste our time. I will concede. I believe you people suck tremendously. You're really bad at being decent and human and honest, and every character attribute human being could have, you fail dismally compared to me. I'm so much better than you. I jump higher, I run faster, I lift more weights. Any contest there is, I do it so much better than you. Now, does that make me a narcissist because I just happen to be everything better than you are? I mean, my eyes are prettier. Every single thing about me is so much better than you. And it's just a fact. And it's not my fault that I'm so much better at functioning and thinking and being logical. It's not my fault. You suck at it. And I happen to excel at it by comparison. But I'll concede, I'm not doing it very well. Okay, compared to an ideal functioning machine, I suck. But you just suck so much worse. And that's a sad truth. And so why don't you look up inflated perception disorder or something? Because you retards, okay, who are throwing your stones at your betters, okay, why aren't you appreciating just the simple fact that, yeah, you really do fail. You really do suck at everything. You can't even make a coherent video. Ugh. Anyway, so yeah, not going to bother with this nonsense. So obviously all of my videos are about arguments. Can you make an argument? Now there is a few milliseconds of my video where I say something like Ken Wheeler's fat. Alright, and that's sort of silly and rude and no point in it, okay? He knows he's fat. I don't need to inform him. I don't need to inform other people. They can see it for themselves. So, yeah, I shouldn't waste any time on, fat jokes or some other aspect. But if somebody once in a while say, oh, he's from an 80s band, But if that's their entire argument, right? I never made a Ken Wheeler video where I just sat there and talked about how fat he was, right? I never made such a video. It would be a tiny, tiny % of the actual content, where all of these assholes just can't seem to, they have it completely reversed. So again, it's more evidence of their fail. You know, it's like, it's like a swimmer who doesn't, use their arms. They're just kicking their feet or something. He just can't do it right. It's a process, and you can't follow the, there's 2 steps, 3 steps. You can't follow the steps. How to be reasonable and coherent. Yes, you can throw in an insult once in a while, but your whole video is a fucking insult. And then, and then he commits worse crimes. That this video is probably not going to be here too much longer because I flagged it for obvious, personal invasion reasons. He thinks he owns my name, my family, my sisters, anybody who lives in the neighborhood I live in. He thinks he owns all those people and can manipulate them any way he wishes. And YouTube just keeps giving him the power to play these silly games. So, just for that crime alone, I shouldn't bother. But yes, he can't make an argument. Ugh. And he should certainly get what he deserves. He should be impeached from the human race. Anyway, so till the next time and such, and so forth and whatnot. Yeah, that's enough of a video. Ugh. Till the next time and such. It's been DraftScience video presentation.